Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana. If you are new here, today is Monday, April the 26th, about to close out April, and that can only mean one thing, and that is that we are getting closer to the end of the legislative session. Our own Mike Kaysen, who has covered the legislature for quite a while, including this year, is here today to give us an update on some of Alabama's most talked about bills. We know this year, especially, it seems like there have been several bills that have been kind of high profile for most of us, and we've really been more interested, Mike. And I've got a list in front of me of all of those topics. We're going to get to all of them. But Mike, I know you've been doing this for a while. While we get people, give them a chance to get on here and see what we're talking about, tell me, is this typical of what happens in the legislature? Are people just paying more attention this year and that's why we're surprised? Or do you think some of these bills are getting a little bit more progressive?
I think this year's a little bit different because it's the most serious consideration of gambling in a long time. Don Siegelman had the lottery plan in 1999 that got on the ballot and voters rejected it. Since then, this is by far the most serious effort to expand and regulate gambling and possibly have a lottery and casinos. And there's huge interest in that. And then the medical marijuana bill, I think there's a lot of interest in that. And it's farther along than it's ever been before. So this year's a little bit different.
I know we've kept you very busy this year, Mike, and I know you're going to be busy. I think the session ends in mid-May. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
May 17th.
Okay, May 17th. So essentially all of these bills need to have some sort of resolution by then, or you got to start over next year.
That's right. That's right.
So let's start off with the one you mentioned a minute ago, and that was gambling. So we know that there is a big gambling proposal up in the legislature. There's one that includes lottery and casinos, which is a little bit surprising, I think, for many Alabamians. So Mike, tell us a little bit about that package and where that package stands today.
It's a constitutional amendment because the Constitution prohibits gambling, so voters would have to approve a constitutional amendment. And this plan would allow a lottery, which would with the proceeds would go to education, and it would allow 6 casinos, 4 at the sites where we have Greyhound tracks now, although we don't have Greyhound races anymore, but those tracks where they have simulcasting and bingo and so forth. So that would be 4 casinos. You'd have one in Dothan, where there's a bingo facility there, and you'd have one in Northeast Alabama. So a total of 6 casinos. And that's pretty much it. That's the main components of it, a lottery and 6 casinos. And also you'd have sports betting. You could bet on sports events at the casinos in person or on your phone through an internet platform.
So that's all part of this one package. Where does that package stand as of today?
It passed the Senate, and it's now in committee in the House. And committee meetings are not scheduled yet. I mean, there will be committee meetings Wednesday, and I think the expectation has been those will be heard in committee this Wednesday. There's 5 days left in the legislative session, so they'll have to come out of committee, and then they would go to the House floor for a vote sometime between now and May 17th. So and the Speaker of the House has said we're going, that's the plan to get a vote on the floor. So
we know that this package has got to go to committee. What does that mean? Does it have to get passed and checked through the committee before it can even go to the House floor to be voted on?
That's right. And the committee will almost certainly propose changes. There's talk there'll be a substitute, which is, a new version of the bill. The Senate's passed this version. The House is always going to want to leave its imprint on it. They're going to want to make changes, and that's where the most of that work goes on, is in committee. And then if the committee approves it, which I think most people assume the committee will approve some form, and it'll come to the House floor for a vote sometime between now and May 17th. And then and then it would be a matter of the House and Senate getting together and agreeing on one final version.
So even after the House votes, it's not totally done.
It's not totally done, right? There's still work to do.
There's a lot of steps here that I think so many of us, if we're not in Montgomery, if we are not covering the legislature every day, it's really easy to get lost in the minutia of all of these steps and all of these committees in hearings. So I'm glad we have you to break that down, Mike. So essentially that bill's still alive. It's going to go to committee, and we're hoping that'll be sometime soon, and we'll get an update after the committee meeting.
Right. It's still alive, and the governor has said repeatedly she's very engaged in this and wants something to go on the ballot, and wants a well thought out plan to go on the ballot for voters to settle this once and for all. So there's, it's far from a done deal, but it is, as you said, it's alive and has a chance.
It's alive. Now we're going to go to the next question. I've got several people talking about medical marijuana. We know that is a bill that has been introduced over the past several years, actually, in the legislature. But this year, it's gotten a little bit more attention. And so, number one, tell us why it's gotten more attention this year, if you know. And number two, where does that bill on medical marijuana stand?
Well, I think it's gotten more attention because it's had more time this year. The first year, this is the third year for it, or third year for a serious effort at it. And the first year it passed the Senate, died, and the House changed it to appoint a commission to study it. They said, we're not ready for this. We need to know more about it. So this commission met for a year, came out with a report, did a pretty thorough job, it looked like. And then last year, COVID pandemic cut short the session, so it had no chance. So this year, it's passed the Senate, and it's come out of committee in the House. It actually went through two committees, which is unusual. The Speaker put it through the Judiciary Committee to look at the legal side, and the Health Committee to look at the health side. It's cleared both those steps, so now it's in position to come to the House for a vote. And so, like the lottery casino bill, it's got a chance. It's alive here with 5 days left. And the Speaker said we're going to have a vote on it on the House floor. At least that's his intention.
Has it passed the Senate yet, or does it need to go through the House?
It has passed the Senate. It has passed the Senate, so it's within range of passing.
So medical marijuana and gambling have already passed the Senate. They just got to pass the House now, and then go on to that next step.
Right. That's correct.
So this one is still alive as well, medical marijuana. Next, we're going to talk about we've got a couple of ones that are a little bit more quick hits. And then we also have the topic of several bills regarding transgender students, transgender minors. So let's talk about some of these quick ones really quickly, and then we'll get to the transgender bill. So number one, there was a talk, I believe, last week about a vaccine passport ban. And that to me, that was worded a little bit strangely, the way that the legislature did that. But essentially, that would be a ban on people requiring a passport saying that you have a vaccine, or a vaccine requirement to do certain things, attend certain events.
Right. It would say the government can't issue an official document like a card or something saying that you've had a passport that would then be used to allow you to obtain government services or admission to a government building. And that would also apply to businesses would not be able to, a store would not be able to demand a passport to let you come into a store, in other words. It's my understanding businesses could still require their employees to be vaccinated, but, and of course there's exceptions to this because schools require vaccinations. But this would, I think the intent is to prevent a broad requirement of a government issued document or card saying I've had a passport, and then that to be used by either government or private entities to qualify for being able to get inside a location or get some kind of services or goods.
So essentially this bill, though, would mean Alabama would ban those sort of passports. Where does that bill stand right now?
That bill's in good position to pass. It's passed the Senate. It's come out of committee in the House. So I think it's got, from what I can tell, it's got strong support. So I would think it's got a good chance to pass.
I'm looking through several comments here, and I just want to answer a couple of quick ones. There was one about medical marijuana, and I think Melissa addressed this, but Melissa, you're right. This was not, medical marijuana bill does not allow smoking marijuana. That is in several different forms, and Mike, you can explain those forms better than I can, but it is not smoking marijuana. There is no lighter situation happening here.
Right. No smoking or vaping. It would be, capsules, gelatin tablets. I think they said a transdermal patch. You could not have baked. You couldn't have anything that you eat. Uh,
So it would be forms that are not edible forms or smoking forms. It would be
that's
oils,
right.
capsules, and things of that nature.
That's
So
right.
going to go ahead and answer that one. Somebody asked about a sports team, and honestly, and I don't know the answer of this, Mike, does professional sports, does that have to go through the legislature at all?
You mean whether we have a professional sports franchise in Alabama? I don't think so. No.
I don't think it does either. I'm not sure who asked that, but that's always something we're talking about here. So let us know what you think about that one as well. Now, moving on to one of these next bills that we talked about was porn filters. That was an interesting one that came up kind of late in the session. We didn't hear about this in the beginning of the session, just heard about it maybe in the last week or so. And I know that is a bill that would essentially require a filter on your cell phone to be turned on for minors that would prohibit them from going to websites that have pornography.
That's right. And the sponsor of this bill, he said his purpose is, he said, unfortunately, there's a lot of parents who aren't careful. They'll get their 12-year-old a cell phone and just hand it over to him without. He said most phones have the filter technology on there, but you have to activate it. And he said there's too many cases where that's not done, and children are exposed to adult content, pornography. And as the way I understand this legislation, it would require mobile devices to have that maximum filter protection in place as a default. So while an adult could disable it, an adult with the access could disable it. The default setting would be the filters in place to make it less likely that kids are going to be exposed to that. And there were people from the wireless industry that are opposed to it and said they agree with the intent, but they said this is not the best way to do it. The best way to go about it is to educate parents and the public about how to use this technology that's already effective at doing this.
Where does that bill stand right now? I know it was introduced kind of late in the session.
That bill is not in good shape to pass. It's still got to come out of committee in the House, and then it would have to go through the House and Senate. So it's very unlikely it will pass this session. It's still a chance, I guess, but does not look like it will.
There was also a bill I know is very controversial, and that was about yoga in schools. This was a bill to allow yoga in schools. Mike, where is that bill right now?
That bill's in position to pass. It passed the House, and it's come out of committee in the Senate. So the Senate could pass it sometime in the next 5 days, between now and May 17th. There was some opposition to that, but I would say it had pretty broad support in both parties. I think there's about 105 members in the House, and I think there was 23 or 24 people that voted, 25 people that voted against it. And there's still some people that have concerns because of yoga's origins with the Hindu religion, which is why the State Board of Education banned yoga in public schools back in '93. That's the reason for this bill. And the sponsor, Jeremy Gray, a Democrat from Opelika, who's a former college athlete, he's done yoga for a decade or so. He learned, he became acquainted with it through his athletics career, and a lot of athletes use yoga, and he's tried to separate the religious aspects from what the yoga that would be practiced in schools, and it would be offered could be offered as an elective, or schools could use it however they wanted to. He said it could be good for behavioral, help with behavioral problems because it, helps people relax. But the bill specifically bans chants and certain things that are, I guess, more the Hindu side of yoga.
Question here from Carlos, and he says, does that include, talking about yoga, would that include all schools in the state, or is that just certain counties?
Would be the ban is statewide, so it would lift the ban statewide. So any school system that wanted to offer yoga as an elective or as an activity in school could do that. It's statewide.
Question, and I cannot find the name of who asked this, but I did see the question, and it was to the extent of, if I have a medical problem and cannot take the capsules, the suppositories, the oils, et cetera, of medical marijuana, would they let me, I guess, have another way to ingest it or to have it? And Mike, I know this is not passed yet, so things could definitely change, but as of right now, it is strictly those measures, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So there were 7 or 8 different forms that the products could be made in, but I guess if a person couldn't use any of those, I don't know. It would create a medical cannabis commission that would consider questions like that and could make changes in the program.
Comment, not really a question, a comment here from Thomas. I think it's interesting. He says, I live in the southeast corner of Houston County. I drive 5 miles to 231 and I cross the state line. And there are several businesses that sell lottery tickets, and both parking lots are full with 90% of Alabama tags there buying the lottery. Thomas, we've heard from so many people like you that live near state lines and see this all the time. And his kind of question he posed is, I think, one, Mike, you and I have heard from plenty of readers. And he says, why not get that money here? Is that something that has been discussed in the legislature regarding this gambling bill?
Yes, very much so. That's, that argument's made every time the legislature debates these bills. And what a lot of the legislative leaders have said, and the rank and file members too, is that they're here more than ever. There's more than ever call from people in their districts that they want to vote on the lottery. That sentiment is stronger than ever, and that's one reason. That's a key reason why it's closer than ever to passing. I mean, we're now surrounded by lottery states, and Mississippi has one. So, yeah, that's
those are, I know we've gotten to a lot of these smaller bills as well. Let's move on to the one that is, there's several bills around this topic, and that is transgender people. There is one regarding transgender treatment or transgender minors receiving medical treatment. And then there is one about transgender high school students playing on sports teams. So let's talk about the sports teams bill first, and then we will talk about the medical treatment. So give us the kind of synopsis of that sports teams bill.
That sports bill, which the governor has already signed into law, says that if you participate in, says that public schools K through 12, their sports teams, students are required to participate based on their gender on their birth certificate, their original birth certificate. So, in other words, a person who identifies as a transgender girl who's born a boy, who's a boy on their birth certificate, they couldn't participate, for example, on the girls' track team, and vice versa.
So that is already, that bill is no longer a bill, it's the law at this point.
It's a law. Well, I don't know if it's taken effect, but the governor signed it. I don't know what the effective date is, but it is going to be law in Alabama.
And what about this medical treatment bill?
That bill has a chance to become law also. It's passed the Senate, and it's in position for a vote in the House, and I would expect it to come up for a vote. It would say that for minors, which in Alabama is anybody under 19, they could not be treated with hormone blocking or puberty blocking medicines or hormone treatments as transgender treatments, to transition from one gender to another. That would be illegal. And it would also be illegal to do any kind of surgeries, transgender surgeries, although that's not done in Alabama anyway on minors. But that bill is, you think of this as affecting a small part of the population, but there's been huge interest in it. I mean, there's been a huge outcry from the people that will be affected by this, and they've shown up at the State House 4 or 5 times in large numbers and spoken out at all the public hearings. And there's a program at UAB that helps minors with these conditions, and they've been very opposed to this legislation also. So it's been very controversial.
So that one, tell us what that has passed and what we're waiting on that bill.
That bill has passed the Senate and it's come out of committee in the House, so it's in position to pass, to become law. It just needs approval by the House.
Mike, we've touched on several of the most controversial, most talked about bills in Alabama this session. I know that a lot of them we're still waiting on, really. Most of these we're still waiting on the final votes to decide if this will happen or not in the state. Mike, I know the session goes through May 17th. There is still time for, I believe, all of these bills we talked about, except for the high school sports teams, which is already law, signed into law. But the other ones we have until May 17th. So I'm sure we'll have to have you back then to get an update on these bills. But it seems like everybody is much more invested, it seems like, in the legislature this year.
Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of interest this year, and it's interesting topics. Usually, often the budgets get a lot of attention, but that's not been the case this year. And I think one reason is because there's not a funding crisis in either the general fund or the education budget. There seems to be enough money there to go around to do, cover their most immediate needs anyway. So
a lot of interesting topics happening. Mike, thank you for the update. I know everybody is very grateful for it. We will have you back when we get a little bit more definitive knowledge on where these things stand.
Thanks, Ivana. Thanks for having me.
Mike, thank you. Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.